I'm speaking to you as a non-typical Irish nationalist. The leftist nationalists call me a neoconservative spouting thinly veiled racism, while the right or alt-right calls me a leftist and say I'm a race traitor because I married a black woman and I don't believe that other races are intrinsically inferior. I'm a political refugee stuck between two uncompromising extremes who don't even understand my positions and ideas and neither want to understand them. However, my positions and ideas are closer to the common sense of ordinary people. I wish to appeal to your common sense, if you're open to it, and hopefully convince you that the level of immigration we're receiving in Ireland and Greater Europe is, on all levels, a gigantic mistake for all involved, except maybe for the people responsible for creating those conditions. In mid-2005, the Irish Times reported that Professor Ferdinand von Prądzyński of Dublin City University predicted that the ethnic Irish will be a minority in their own country by 2050, a mere 33 years from my writing this. He wasn't condemning or celebrating this prediction, but instead he was insisting that the Irish people get used to the prospect, as attempting to resist it will hurt our economy. This has been the mantra of those supporting the program of unlimited immigration, which has an aspect of truth to it. The Irish aren't breeding fast enough for the needs of our globalized corporate economy. The first objection I and many others have to unlimited immigration is based on a sadness that an old order is being replaced without any rational discussion or open communication with the native peoples of Europe as to whether the global economy is really that important in the first place, whether keeping up with a system that's enslaving and murdering countless billions of people and imposing unjust and autocratic laws from an increasingly centralized power is really worth giving up our heritage and identity for. Professor Prądzyński gives us a token gesture when he praises Irish culture, saying, "Ireland, as a multicultural society, will be able to make a particularly valuable contribution to the new Europe and will be able to continue to lead as a country in which high-value innovation takes place and strong community values are espoused." Leaving aside the fact that this is not an adequate appraisal of Irish culture, but instead an account of how our globalist overlords find us useful, our German friend either fails to recognize or does not wish to mention that our culture will not actually survive without Irish people to perpetuate it. Culture comes from people carrying on traditions and behavioral patterns, passing those down through family bonds and institutions. Whenever masses of people leave their homelands and settle in other lands, they almost always retain their identities and recreate their native cultures in the communities they settle in, which is completely natural and completely within their rights to do. Or they enter into a chaotic melting pot, sacrificing their cultural identities in the process. Every society that has embraced multiculturalism in the history of mankind has been a testament to this dynamic, but the most recent and clear example of this is the United States. When European immigrants made the hazardous journey to the New World in modern times, they segregated into their own communities, and when they mingled, it generally devolved into a culture of gang warfare and crime. This tradition has continued right up to today. The United States, outside of stereotypical suburbia in the South, is a collection of cultural islands, isolated ethnic communities where one could live one's whole life without speaking a word of English and not have to deal with a single person who is not of one's own ethnic or racial group, except maybe when going to the DMV or talking to other authorities. This is not an attribute of a healthy or peaceful society, and is the complete opposite of the paradise promised to us by the multiculturalists. The biggest culprits of self-segregation by leaps and bounds are the Chinese, the ethnic group Professor Prodzinski admits will be the largest in Ireland come 2050. Call it racist, prejudiced, or any of these buzzwords you wish to employ to avoid having to think about this, but the nature of the Chinese is insular and, wait for it, racist. And that's A-okay with me. I'm a tolerant person. I just don't want millions of insular and racist Chinese living atop of my ancestors' land. To allow these people into Ireland or anywhere else and then seek to impose our way of life upon them would make the host culture intolerant and racist. This is who they are, how they chose to live, and likely how their very genetic composition compels them to live, molded by millennia of environmental factors and collective experiences. Who are we to take that away from them? And who are they to take who we are from us? 21st century Europeans and North Americans have somehow hoodwinked themselves into thinking that they're not white supremacist, racist bigots anymore. That because we freed some slaves and felt sorry for the Native Americans, that we're somehow transcended above the white man's burden of being superior. But everyone else can see that the emperor has no clothes. We live in luxury, driving around in cars fueled by oil acquired from the Middle East and South America, enjoying the world's knowledge at our fingertips brought to us by the coltan acquired from Africa, and countless other things our globalized economy commits genocide in order to acquire in our names, and then we swing the doors of Rome open to these people as if we're doing them some kind of favor. We've destroyed their homelands for our purpose, and now we feel sorry for them, so let's invite them into our homes en masse. We've declared that all men, regardless of race or culture or creed, are essentially the same. So when these people do come to our homes, we're shocked when they don't share our egalitarian values, and we seek to retrain them like wild animals. We call it integration. The left dares to call me racist, but in actual fact, I'm the one fighting racism. The irony of this self-delusion would be funny, but this is a tragedy that keeps me awake most nights and haunts me to the point that I can't lead a normal life. The so-called Third World is a giant disaster zone. Through various incarnations of colonialism and globalism, living there has become a nightmare for a lot of people. Now that China has become a global power, they have entered into the neo-colonial game, and believe it or not, they're even worse than any European power ever was, as they're establishing factories in Africa and slowly moving their excess populations there to displace the natives, making their homelands a hostile place to live. The Portuguese, after being hit by the economic depression, have begun to migrate to their old colony Mozambique. This, while thousands of Africans recently overwhelmed the Moroccan-Spain border. Does this sound like a sane world to you, or at the very least the beginning transformation into a better world? You might come back to me and ask, well, what's your alternative? And I'd answer, I don't know. Between being called a racist for even wanting to discuss these things, being banned from social media or threatened with legal action by the European Union, or threatened with violence by Antifa for daring to air these concerns in public, I'm still waiting for a public discourse to occur. I have no aspirations to become emperor of all mankind or install a fascist dictatorship that will magically have all our answers. This is a disaster we created together, so we should solve it together. All I know is that inviting unlimited number of these people into our homeland isn't in any way a solution for us or them, particularly since we barely have the resources to take care of our own poor and disenfranchised, never mind take care of their poor and disenfranchised, and successfully integrate them into this utopian multicultural mega economy. On top of that, I'm not exaggerating when I use the word unlimited. There literally is no end to how many will come knocking on our door year after year. As the more migrants leave their homelands, the more room and resources are available for them to replenish their numbers at home. It's a cold hard fact of human nature that a population under stress will procreate earlier in life and more often to ensure genetic survival, but only so many children will survive as there are resources and space to accommodate them. It's pure numbers. Let's give a thought as to what kind of people are coming from these countries. Precisely the people who should stay in their countries and help resolve the issues they're fleeing. We're receiving the wealthiest, physically fittest, most adventurous, and most intelligent of their people. We call that brain drain. Irrevocable harm is being done because we want to feel progressive and benevolent by swinging the doors of Rome open, when really we should be wise for our own sake and theirs and slam that door shut. Finally, I want to address my own country specifically, the island of Ireland and its soon-to-be extinct native population. What will become of us? Back in 2015, I was sent a link to an article. If memory serves, it was on the Irish Independent. This article was sent to me in jest, but I swear I'm still reeling from PTSD I got from the first paragraph alone. It was by a young black man who proclaimed to be as Irish as a Norman or a Gael Irish-born Irishman. My problem isn't that he was black. He could have been French, Italian, or British, and it would have upset me to equal measure because the first thing he cited was that he enjoyed going for a pint after work, just like his Irish friends. Just recalling this moment has traumatized me all over again and has me considering going for a pint myself. A pint of battery acid or perhaps bleach. Nothing this man said had anything whatsoever to do with actual Irish culture except for the pastime of drinking ourselves into oblivion because we had nothing else to do while being subjugated for 700 years. In all reality, I wasn't completely angry with this individual, but angry with the fact that this is all he knows of Ireland, and very, very few Irish people who read this piece objected to it. Put frankly, because we don't acknowledge our own culture. Earlier this year, a British journalist by the name of Melanie Phillips came under fire from our ambassador to Britain for writing that Ireland has a tenuous claim to nationhood. Sadly, I believe she's absolutely correct. The truth told by the devil is still the truth. We're a nation of self-hating drunks. The only reason we have a free state to begin with is because rich aristocrats from Europe funded and physically fought in the 1916 Easter Rising we begrudgingly pay homage to, and deep down we all know this. The Irish, our language, our culture, and highly sophisticated social and legal system survived the various waves of so-called invasions, and we absorbed all of these people into our superior society. Yeah, I said superior, so shoot me. What we didn't survive was the systematic purging of that sophisticated social structure by the British common law kingdom. a process of brainwashing that literally took hundreds of years to complete and is in its final phase today, as we now willingly ignore the cornerstones of that culture. The real tragedy is that we barely had our own sovereignty for 100 years and only experienced affluence and relative comfort in the past 25 years, and now our economy has been imploded by the international banks, while those very same powers insist that we allow unlimited numbers of people to settle in our space. We've only gotten to enjoy our freedom, and perhaps we may, in due time, have turned back to our identity and our ways and taught those to our children. But now we have to subvert that natural healing process in exchange for a multicultural globalist program. No wonder the newcomers think being Irish is about getting drunk. How would they know any different when we ourselves don't know any different?